Okay, so I think we're just about ready to get started. Yeah, morning again. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Steve Richardson, and my co-director Steve Price is going to be presenting as usual. So I'm going to be fielding any questions that you may have during the webinar or at the end, and making sure that hopefully the technology runs nice and smoothly. Just the usual run through of Zoom features. So you can select your own audio settings to test your speakers. You can submit questions via the Q&A panel, which is right at the bottom of your screen. And if you need to leave the meeting, then that's fine, but you can rejoin using the link that you've already used to join. Okay, so if need be, you can raise your hand, and with that, I'll just hand you over to Steve.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, and thank you for all of you on today's webinar for joining us. I'm sure everybody's busy, and the irony isn't lost on us that if you're here now, you've already reclaimed some of your time. So perhaps it's the people who aren't here that perhaps need to hear these the messages that we're going to be trying to give you over the next hour even more. So first of all, well done for being here. That's the first stage, and I appreciate you making this choice, and we'll endeavour to give you as much value as we can in the next hour or so. So let's consider this quote in front of us right now: either run the day or the day runs you. And that really is a reflection on the theme for what we're going to be covering today. But before we get stuck in, I just want to throw in just our usual disclaimer. This is general educational information today, and I don't want anybody to substitute it for any tailored advice, which obviously would be specific to your own particular circumstances. So our aim is to educate, and we keep it nice and general. Okay, so you're going to get most out of this webinar if you take notes today. You're going to be sharing quite a lot of value with you, and you're going to get most out of it if you take some notes down. As Steve's already said, feel free to submit questions. We've allocated time at the end. We've got no pressure on us to make sure we get through all of your questions. So please do ask them. You'll get the most value out of that. So let's have a look what we're going to be covering then. Okay, so we'll discuss why we'll always be busy. There's no point in pretending today that we can make ourselves unbusy. We're always going to be busy. So how do we deal with it? Let's have a look at some mindsets that can help us reclaim our time. We'll also identify where time is being wasted and try and discuss some practical ways to free up your time. And then we're going to discuss your next steps and answer any questions. As I've already said, answer any questions that you've got in the Q&A section. Okay, so let's get started. So to kick off, going to take a look at why we'll always be busy. So here's our top 5 reasons why we think people will always be busy. Number 1, work expands to the time available. We often pace our output to match the timeline we have. So perhaps our team members are doing this too. Think about budgets or the time we allocate for jobs. When we have a budget or time allocation, sometimes that can be arbitrary. It brings focus to how much time we have available for the completion of it. Number 2, something that I'm sure everybody can resonate with is distractions. So we might have a job that needs finishing, but perhaps it lacks a clear deadline. So it sits waiting, and we find ourselves sometimes procrastinating, picking up and putting down other seemingly urgent interruptions, or constantly getting distracted. Number 3, our perception of busyness can change. So it's all relative to us, really. If you think, for example, a child at school, a child in a high school might have 1 hour of homework per day, but trying to fit this in with all the other tasks that a teenager has can sometimes make them feel very busy. If you look at a university student, they're slightly older, obviously, and may have an increased workload, but now they can produce more. So they don't feel any busier than when they were at high school. And obviously when they go on to get a job, their workload increases again, and they still feel busy. So it's a relative perception a lot of the time. And also there's another perception coming in here, and that's that being busy is successful. How often do we link those two together? Think about how we respond to people who ask us. They might just say, how are you doing? Do you ever hear anybody say, well, I'm bored, or I'm struggling to fill my time? Nobody ever says that, because it's a perception of not being successful. Then being too busy is often an excuse, and it's something that we're very keen in-house here at Inspire to try and make sure doesn't seep through as an excuse, because when we have more time, we don't necessarily do the things we wish to achieve. So for example, working on our business is so often put on the back burner. Likewise, we put books aside to read, and quite often never get round to reading them. How many books do you own that you've never read, you've never got round to reading? I think we all probably do. So in other words, the point I'm trying to make here is that we choose to work in the way that we do. So we have to make better choices about how we're going to reclaim our time. So let's have a look at some helpful mindsets to get us started with doing that. So this is quite a busy slide, but I'm going to try to break it down for you. This is based upon an absolutely brilliant book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and that's written by Stephen Covey. Now, for everybody on the webinar today, you'll either form one of the following two groups. You'll have either read it and agree with me, or you won't have read it, which means you should still be trying to get that in your Santa's stocking, in your Christmas stocking in the next couple of weeks, because this is an absolutely phenomenal book, which should be mandatory reading for all business owners. So we're just going to talk through actually 3 of those 7 habits this morning, which refer to time management. So the first habit is to be proactive. Down here in the corner, number 1, to be proactive. Make the choice to improve your life through the things you can influence. The second is to begin with the end in mind. So your values are a framework for decision making. Use them to set your goals and then focus on achieving them. And the third is to put first things first. So set your priorities and focus on them to avoid wasting time on either unimportant or non-urgent tasks. So it's these 3 here in the corner of the 7 that refer to time management. Just for the completeness of this, the other habits go on to talk about thinking win-win, seeking first to understand rather than to be understood, to synergize, and then what Stephen Covey calls sharpening the saw. They're the full 7 habits, but it's those first 3 really which you can take from that book to help you with time management. Now, this is a mindset we often refer to. It certainly runs right through the heart here at Inspire, and anybody who's done any sort of business planning or coaching with us will be more than familiar with the ORBED model. So ORBED, as you can clearly see from this slide, is an acronym, and we split out 2 different models in terms of, do we work above the line, which is where we should be aiming for, or do we work below the line? So being proactive is about staying above the line and focusing on what you can control. So not being a victim and saying there's nothing you can do about the lack of time you have. So so this might sound confronting, but you're choosing to be as busy as you are, or more specifically, you're choosing to do the things you're doing. So there's always examples of where people can have acted above the line and below the line, but a very clear example is, setting out a plan, a business plan for your own business, to take responsibility for doing that. You could say today is an example of us trying to and wanting to act above the line. For years I debated and talked about how I would like to run these sort of educational series, and then COVID came along, the pandemic period, and we were we were impulsed to do it. We knew we had to get our message out to our clients. And now it's become, well, it's become habitual. We run one of these every month, and it's become the norm to us. And that's us, you know, taking responsibility, and we feel like we owe it to our clients to run these sort of educational briefings or webinars, etc. And I think that's a great example of us at least trying to be above the line, instead of making the excuses that perhaps once upon a time we made, which was, you know, we don't have time to do these. It's okay, but we have to sit down and prepare for them. You know, which quite frankly is just an excuse. So look, Stephen Covey's second habit of his highly effective people, it ties quite closely into Warbed. And that habit, as I said on the previous slide, is called starting with the end in mind. It's thinking about how you'd like people to describe you at your funeral. So without sounding too morbid, you can start being that person now. So stay above the line on this and stay firm on your time management so you can be that person you want other people to perceive you as. Okay, so the what we're going to talk about now is Atomic Habits. Again, this is taken from a book. This is a book I read earlier this year by James Clear, and this is Atomic Habits. So from a reclaiming your time perspective, let's focus on your identity. Say you want to be more proactive and focus on what you can control, but you find yourself distracted at times. Imagine you've set aside time to complete some of your business plan actions. But then an email or a text message pops up on your phone. Okay, this is called the queue. You can see that there's a message and you want to read it. So now you want that dopamine hit, and that's the craving. So you open the email. This is the response. And you think to yourself, it's just a short email, or perhaps a text message from a client, and you know the answer, so you quickly start tapping out your response, and 10 minutes later, you hit send. This is the reward as you feel satisfied that you've responded to the client's email, and before you know it, you're on to the next email or next text message, and so on and so on. But what we need to do is to remove the queue or replace it with a different one. What if you switched off your email or phone notifications while you've allocated time to working on your business? The queue could then be, let's say, the handwritten to-do lists that you've got in your business plan actions. And obviously you'll have created them before you've sat down for your session. Then the craving becomes wanting to tick off each of the actions on your list. The response is to spend an hour on your business plan. And then the reward is that you can sit down afterwards and you can have your cup of coffee. And then you can go back to your social media, your emails, in the knowledge that you have now worked on your actions that are specific to achieving your objectives within your own business. So we need a mindset that reflects our identity. Who do we need to be to control our time? Only you can adjust your behavior. And if you want to reclaim your time, you've got to do something different. So let's look at what you can do differently now using what I think is the best time management model around. And that is the Achiever Matrix. Again, this has been created by Stephen Covey. I haven't invented this. This is just using what other people have already set out, but using these kind of mindsets can make huge, significant differences to you. So again, if you haven't read this book, it's one that you really, really should be reading. So in a nutshell, this matrix reflects that we all live in a time-pressured world with multiple overlapping commitments. Urgency is no longer reserved just for special occasions. So separating tasks into these 4 quadrants that you can see on screen helps us to better manage a flood of responsibilities. It helps us to do excellent work and maintain a positive frame of mind. It directly reflects the 3rd habit of effective people, again, going back to what we saw earlier, and that's putting first things first. So we need to try to spend less time working in this urgent quadrant and more time working in quadrant 2. That is really the aim of this, to try and spend as much time as possible in quadrant 2. That's because that is the quadrant of quality. This is the quadrant of planning, prevention, or perhaps even innovation. This is where we'll improve our processes and where we are most productive. It's also where we can prevent a number of important things from becoming urgent and falling into that disruptive first quadrant. That's the quadrant urgency. We also need to assess what things that are not important are distracting us from working in the quadrant of quality. And that's in these bottom 2 quadrants here. What disruptions can we minimize or eliminate? What strategies can we use to reclaim some of that time spent on non-important things? And as you can see, we've split that into the quadrant of deception. We talked earlier on about disruptive emails or texts or whatever when you're trying to spend time in quadrant 2. And then again, I'm sure everyone can resonate. We all spend some degree of time, unfortunately, in the quadrant of waste. So the first strategy then, strategy number 1, is to utilize the productivity pyramid. Let's have a look at it. The pyramid looks at time versus the return on your time investment. So as you'll know, the picture, the shape of a pyramid, it has a wider base and comes to a narrow top. And the idea is that as we move our way up the productivity pyramid, we spend less time and have a greater return on the time that we've spent. So let's look through every stage. Okay, so the first stage is to improve. This is where you can work on mastering your expertise or working better. So this might be getting trained or getting educated, going on a course, attending a webinar, etc., to improve what you do. The next is to increase. This is where we get more people to do what you're doing by delegating or outsourcing. So this might be building a team in your business. This might be getting outsourced or subcontracted help, etc., so that we increase or expand. The third is to invest. This is where we can start to invest in technology, perhaps become digitalized, so we can start to bring systems in. And again, as we're going up the pyramid, less time now has to be spent on the same duties by yourself. So you are freeing up your own time as you take your business through each stage of the productivity pyramid. Then we can invent. This is where we might actually start to write our own systems. This is creating IP, and most commonly this could be writing our own app. This is where we actually start to say, okay, we're going to start to invent our own systems now to really start to leverage our own time and make things really more efficient. The final stage is actually to innovate, and that's when we can start to work on better things. What examples do you have in your business where you can possibly start to innovate and actually change the things that you're doing? If you're at that stage, you've only got to that stage because you've been able to free up your own time. And in some way that might have come through working through a pyramid like this. Whether you've done that consciously or subconsciously, this is paramount to improving our business, freeing up our own time and moving on to things like innovation. And I think 2020 in the pandemic period has been a year in which a lot of us perhaps have been forced to have a look at these in our business. And the webinar we ran back in, it was possibly August or September, focused on some examples we've seen from our clients in which they've really started to use this period and innovated within their business, either doing different things, as in new services, new products, etc., or doing things differently because they've truly started to innovate within the business. And that's when you really are at the peak of the productivity pyramid. So looking at this from a whole then, could you free up your time by employing others or contracting out some of the work on the second level? What systems or software solutions could you utilize to free up your time and increase your efficiency? Improved systemization not only frees up your time, it also allows you to grow your business without increasing the risk or workload for you. Are there other things you could be working on to derive a better return on your time investment? Again, you know, the environment which COVID-19 has thrown on us has forced many of us to think how we can adapt, to innovate, perhaps re-engineer, or even reinvent the way we work. We're happy to discuss how to use this productivity pyramid for your advantage. Often a fresh set of eyes looking over your unique situation opens up opportunities that you may have not seen before. Combining your expertise with ours is also a great way to help distinguish the wood from the trees and come up with a better way of working. The second strategy is to reclaim your time by stopping working with the wrong people. So what I'm trying to say here is avoid working with people who, let's say, don't pay your invoices on time, treat you or your team badly, don't live into your core values, or are unreliable. And sometimes when we move away from these people, or perhaps we disengage with them, we can sometimes refer to this as opening the door of opportunity to them, i.e. you show them the exit. So if you open the door of opportunity to the wrong people, it can free up your time to spend with better customers or better clients, and your team will thank you for it. Is there someone who comes to mind that you'd like to open that door of opportunity to? So this is an obvious one for a lot of people. The next strategy is about reclaiming some of your time by running better meetings. So obviously I appreciate, depending on what your business is, some of you will have more meetings or a higher volume of meetings than others. There is value in having regular meetings if they're done well. Whether the 10-minute toolbox meetings, you know, just over a cup of coffee, or meetings with prospective customers, ensure they're efficient and valuable to everyone that's attending. Poorly planned meetings are consistently a top 10 time waster. So got a couple of rules of the game, if you like, to run through here that can hopefully point you in the direction of running effective meetings. Number one, set a time limit and then stick to it. So if it's a toolbox meeting, make sure it's no more than 10 minutes. If it's a monthly team meeting, set the timing at 45 minutes or an hour. Check the time as you go through the meeting and remind everyone of the time agreed if it looks like the meeting will drag on. Personally, this is one I have always struggled with, and I think having most of my meetings now via Zoom, for obvious reasons, has actually hugely helped me to do that. And it's not something I've consciously done. It's just running virtual meetings as opposed to physical ones has made it much easier to set time limits. And it's something that, personally speaking, I'd like to try and, you know, when we do go back to whatever normal shape post-COVID looks like, it's something that I'd like to do to try and have that time limit around meetings. What about prior to meetings? What about considering pre-work ahead of meetings? That increases efficiency dramatically. It helps you get to the core of any issues much more quickly in the meeting itself. The third one, set a regular rhythm for team meetings. So for example, a daily or weekly huddle. Having these meetings scheduled means your team will remain fully informed and you won't be repeating yourself to every team member. Likewise, you're providing a forum for feedback, so you should get less interruptions during the rest of your working day. Consider having a clear purpose and agenda. Make sure that every meeting has this and a predefined agenda in place. This encourages attendees to prepare and minimizes the risk that the meeting will go off on a tangent and soak up more unnecessary time. If an item comes up that isn't on the agenda, you have to set that aside and put it into a different agenda to deal with that. This closely aligns with the pre-work that we mentioned already, the second one in the list there. Within the meeting itself, Focus on actions, not lengthy discussions. If you've received the pre-work prior to the meeting and you have an agenda, then you should be able to make decisions quickly. If there needs to be a more detailed discussion, delegate it to the most appropriate person in that meeting and set a separate meeting so you're not wasting everyone's time. Record your agreed actions from the meeting, who's going to do what and by when. And the last one, as always, is to try and remain accountable. Bring accountability into your meetings. This is the check on the actions being recorded within the meeting that they're being done. So for each meeting, check in that the actions from the previous meetings were done. Have follow-up or regular meetings, making sure that these get done. So how well do your meetings stack up? What can you do to improve the effectiveness of your meetings? Strategy number 4. So the 10 hats, organizational review. This is an essential mindset for business structure, for leadership and for management. It clearly defines what roles in your business are what roles in your business are operational versus those that are strategic. Now, the major error that people make with this particular mindset is they might say, well, hang on a second, that's not my business. My business doesn't have that structure. It's not big enough. There aren't that many people. The truth is that every business, from a one-man band to a business with hundreds of employees, they all have this structure. I'm going to talk through why that is the case. It's all about who wears the hats. So this also helps you draw accountability lines to allow for better planning, reporting, delegation and time management, as well as helping assess resourcing gaps. It's important to ensure a business is sustainable, scalable, and ultimately saleable. So the 10 hats, if you like, reflect the 10 departments that exist in any business. And again, this is whether it's big or small. Every department needs one leader, but remember that responsibility and doing are not the same. So the leader may delegate the work away, but ultimately they're the final decision makers. So in your business, how many hats are you currently wearing from these 10 departments that you can see on the slide? What hats should you consider removing to free up your capacity to work on the more important things? So that's the big question being asked here. Doing a 10 hats organizational review will analyze the hats you're wearing well and those that are perhaps not not playing to your natural strength or are being neglected. And then we can form a plan to ensure you take some of those hats off and become more efficient with your own time. More specifically, the benefits of a 10 hats organizational review are, so we can develop clarity of the individual roles and how they work together, improved delegation and personal development for your team members, clear accountability lines, will help you identify resourcing gaps and outsourcing opportunities, and also provides for scaling up without blowing you apart. So let's briefly consider some examples of contracting out or outsourcing to help you reclaim your time. So first of all, marketing. It's an obvious example. Not every business can justify employing a full-time marketing person to create and implement their marketing plan, maintain their website, and deliver their email or social media campaigns. Finance is another common hat to outsource. Do you really need to be doing your VAT returns in the evenings after work? Obviously, this is one that we're naturally familiar with, and we provide, obviously, this service to many of our clients. HR is an obvious one, an expensive one to get wrong. And let's be honest, who aspires to being a HR expert themselves? When you set up your own business, it's very often something that becomes apparent to you. It's knowledge that you need to have, but nobody ever really sets out saying that's what I wanted to have. So is that something you can potentially outsource? And other examples include IT and admin, and it helps you minimize risk and in the long term saves you time and money. So strategy number 5, delegation. There are many misconceptions around delegation. Delegation is a skill that you have to master. Delegating is not flinging a task at someone and just hoping they'll do it right. Effective delegation requires communication. So firstly, you must assess the task and delegate it to the right person. Provide clear support as they learn how to complete this new task. You must communicate the parameters, both verbally and also back it up with written procedure as well. Ask your team member to repeat back the task instructions to ensure nothing was lost in translation, and also set a clear deadline for completion. Articulating the project objectives will help the team member further understand what your expectations are, and most importantly, set some time to review the outcomes together. It's going to be unlikely that they'll always get it right first time. Don't be surprised or offended if, with their fresh perspective, they find a more efficient way of achieving the desired outcome. This is often a happy byproduct of delegation, along with improved trust, respect, communication, and productivity, which all lead, hopefully, to improved profit and happiness for you and your team and your customers. Many people confuse delegation with abdication. Abdication is where you set your team member up to fail, ultimately damaging the culture, the communication, the productivity, and so on. Make sure that in your business, you're not simply abdicating and calling it delegation. Getting this right, strategy number 5, is an absolute must for your own personal time management. So, what will you do with the time you've freed up? If you watch the video that Jenny ran for our ahead of this webinar, Jenny talked about freeing up her time was all about finding a quiet corner in the house to enjoy some chocolate away from the children. It's a very personal thing. What will you do with your free time? Here are some examples or recommendations that we'd have. Firstly, committing to teaching others what you've learned. It's a fantastic thing to be able to do, because not only does it teach your team members around you, but it further consolidates your knowledge, where you're able to take your own learnings and pass them on to somebody else. Spending time sharpening your saw. You would have seen from Stephen Covey's seven habits of effective people that sharpening your saw is habit number 7, and it really is about refining your own skills and seeing your own improvement, getting to that really ultimately performing version of yourself that you want to be or that you aspire to be. The next one, planning more effectively and being more commercially minded. How many of us would enjoy that prospect? Creating better habits. We are, after all, as humans, driven by our habits. And of course, taking time for yourself to ensure your health and well-being, whether that's spending time with your family on sports or spending time in a quiet spot with your own favorite bar of chocolate. What will be the one that you choose to do with your free time? At times, we can all feel the water rising around us. Stress, pressure, and lack of time can damage our ability to maintain perspective on what really matters, both in the workplace and obviously in our personal lives as well. We know we must make time for our wellness, or we'll likely be forced to make time for our illness. Instead of trying to fit our important me time activities amongst our work commitments, why don't we flip that on its head and bed those non-negotiable activities into our schedule and then fit the work stuff in around them? There's a lot of evidence that if we do this, we're likely to turn up and be more productive. Okay, so what are the next steps from here? All right, well, number one, assess where your own time is being underutilized. This will help you become more conscious of the daily choices you make that impact your capacity. Get clear on the habits you wish to create. A fantastic way of doing that is reading James Clear's book. It's really good. It's a great insight into the habits that are there, whether we choose them or not. But focus on the ones you know will improve your productivity and focus. Planning for sustainable improvement starts with you and obviously the other leaders in your business. Identify your 3 most important actions. We'll be asking you to record these in our feedback survey at the end of this webinar, so that you can be sure that this hour today has been powerful for you in bringing about real change in your time management. Focus on what you can do instead of worrying about those things that are outside of your control. And obviously, getting support. We're here to help you with these, with everything we've discussed today around you and your business. Okay, so the information in this educational webinar is general in nature, so it's no substitute for specific tailored advice and support. There are several ways that we can help you. We always feature this for the clients that are interested. The 10 Hats organizational review is something we can come in and help you with in your business, find out where the resource gaps are, find out if we can make you more productive or help you to become more productive in your business. So if you are looking for our support in that, you can see the price there, £1,400 for one of our organizational reviews. We can help bring accountability in your business with coaching. We have many clients already who do this and have made, put themselves up to be accountable, and we do this with them. We can agree a fee with that to get you on a program. Again, from the feedback at the end of this webinar, with no charge, you can ask us for an Achiever Matrix worksheet. You saw the quadrants earlier on in the Achiever Matrix. We've got a worksheet based around that. It's something in January we're going to be doing amongst our team here at Inspire. Why don't you do the same? A really good way to find out where people's time is being spent, and more importantly, where it should be spent. And as usual, if you want to discuss any of these issues with us in more detail, we're not going to charge for that. Please, on the form, ask us for a meeting. People do every month when we run these webinars, and hopefully we can go into some more detail, completely free of charge, to help you absorb some of this information. Okay, I'm going to invite Steve back in now, because Steve has been watching the questions that you've been going through as part of this. Have we got some questions there, Steve?
Thanks, Steve. Yes, just a couple. Hi, James. I think Steve sort of answered this one anyway, but can we get a copy of the Achiever Matrix worksheet? Yes, you can. At the end of the webinar, you'll be redirected to a feedback page, and the Achiever Matrix is downloadable from there. And Kerry, hi. So how can I get my team involved in this? How can I sort of roll it out, from here? We're going to be putting a video recording on YouTube. And of course, you can share the Achiever Matrix worksheet with them as well, which I think will be very useful. That's the only questions we have, Steve.
All right, that's fantastic. So I think the exercise of that worksheet is something that we recommend everybody to do in their business. As I say, it's something that we're going to revisit in January ahead of the new year. January is that month where we all come back hopefully more enlightened with the new year ahead of us. Everybody's really looking forward to putting a final lid on 2020 and hoping for much better things in the new year ahead. I guess it just remains for Steve and I then to wish you a very Merry Christmas. Steve's already said that this is the last one of 2020. We have a full program lined up for next year. We intend to continue running these webinars every month. From what we get, the feedback what we get from people says, you know, people are enjoying these and getting value from it. We very much intend to continue. So we wish you a Merry Christmas, a prosperous New Year, and we'll check in on you in January.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas, everyone. Have a good holiday. Bye.
And the final comment is, do or do not. There is no try, from that wisely old man Yoda from Star Wars. Thanks very much, everybody.